Hello, and welcome to the Tracie Austin Show, where we bring you the truth about the paranormal, the supernatural, and the highly strange. Without further delay, your host, Tracie Austin.
Hey everyone, thank you for joining us. I'm Tracie Austin, and just a quick reminder, if you have not yet subscribed to the show at our YouTube channel, we would love for you to support us and subscribe to the show. All you need to do is click on the link, and that is it. And we would greatly appreciate you supporting and following us. Now, today's show, I have, by popular demand again, because he has such a wealth of information, John DeSouza is back with us. And we are talking about the kids, the Indigo Kids of 9/11. There are many things that I have researched and experienced in the paranormal over the years, but one thing that really does intrigue me is the Indigo children. So who better to have back on the show to talk about this is our FBI guy, John DeSouza. So let's go ahead and meet John again. Hey there, John.
Hi there, Tracie. Great to be back with you again.
Wonderful. Thank you for joining us once again. I thought who better to talk to about the Indigo Kids than you, because you had investigated the kids of 9/11, the Indigo Kids.
Yes, absolutely. And it was quite a shocking experience for myself and dozens of other law enforcement officers across the country who had to deal with the same thing.
Okay. For our audience who do not know what Indigo Kids, what it's all about, basically they are children who are the next evolutionary stage in the human race. And they have special powers, they have paranormal abilities, clairvoyance, they have precognition. They're here on Earth to help the shift into the new intuitive age, and they are also known as the new human, as they're also called, and they are spiritually awake. John, would you say that that pretty much sums it up of Indigo Kids?
Yes, absolutely. Indigo Kids are children with special gifts that are supposed to help us, to lead us into our new age of awakening and higher consciousness and so forth. But the wildest thing about Indigo Kids is that it's very possible that all kids are Indigo Kids before they get to the public school system that kind of regiments them and crushes that kind of imaginative, creative powers out of them. Mm-hmm. That's my own opinion from what I've seen.
Okay. Well, what I'd like to do is I'd like to show the video of you talking about the Indigo Kids of 9/11. So take a look at this.
After 9/11, all these cases started coming forward. Children drawing pictures of burning buildings before it happened. Others saying they made predictions of 9/11. They were called Indigo children.
There is absolutely no doubt that this is a different kind of child. It's a different kind of human being. They think differently. They are completely different.
I investigated several Indigo children while in the FBI. Could they predict the future? Terror events?
There were a lot of people that had premonitions of the tragedy of 9/11, days, even weeks before the event actually happened. The problem is, what do you do with it?
Okay, John, we've just seen you talking about the Indigo Kids of 9/11 there, and as you had written in your book, The Para Investigators, there were children who, at the time of the 9/11 terrorist attacks, having very vivid dreams and premonitions of this horrible, horrible event. And in fact, who was reporting these kids' stories at the time?
Well, it wasn't their parents. So it was caretakers, babysitters, school bus drivers, teachers, teaching staff, people who were in a paranoid state because of what was going on at the time. This is immediately after the events of 9/11, when there was this huge campaign from the government, see something, say something, anything that could have any relation to terrorism at all, even the most ridiculous thing that you could think of, didn't matter. People were told, report it, report it, report it. And so it was kind of a paranoid atmosphere. And so in that thinking of what happened immediately in 2001, immediately after, that was the kind of atmosphere where these babysitters, these caretakers, these teachers were reporting these incidences, even though they were kind of embarrassed at the time when they were reporting them.
Mm-hmm. And isn't it true that the FBI did investigate these Indigo Kids and law enforcement as well?
Yeah, not just them, but their families as well. Anybody that they came in contact with that could have, because we had to search for the physical explanation, which is that maybe these kids overheard someone in the family. Maybe they overheard some plans that were being made about this terrible terrorist attack that was being put together. And so, yeah, we had to investigate every single one of them. It didn't matter how tenuous or how ridiculous the law enforcement officer may have felt going out to interview an eight-year-old about a dream that he had. It didn't matter. These leads had to be shagged out to the end. They had to be pursued out to the end in each instance, no matter what.
Now, did the parents have permission to?
The parents had to be there, and they had to give permission, of course, because these were minor children. And in many instances, the parents were as bewildered as the law enforcement officer was. But it had to be done.
And what about checks on the parents? Did that happen as well?
Yes, and in every single instance, all the checks in every single one of these cases came back no connection to terrorism whatsoever. So it was, each of these leads were ultimately washed out as having no possible connection to 9/11, which left nothing except the paranormal explanation.
John, what did these files look like? Of these interviews, because this is really like a real episode of the X-Files.
Yeah. The files were pretty short on substance because they had to be done quickly, they had to be done thoroughly, efficiently, and like I said, they had to be done right to the end. So they couldn't be made into a huge full investigation of any sort. It had to be done quietly, as quietly as you could, doing something as bizarre as that. But it had to be taken care of as quietly as possible and as quickly as possible as well.
Right. And surely, John, there must have been curiosity on the part of, paranormal curiosity on the part of law enforcement and FBI. Surely.
Yeah, there was. As a matter of fact, on the particular lead that I had to cover in this area, I actually ended up we're always partnered with a police officer, regular police officer, and so I had to cover one of these, and it was a little boy who had a dream where that he had told various relatives and caretakers about, where it was a dream where he was in a room. It was a completely white room with a black phone on a little pedestal, and the phone kept ringing louder and louder and louder. And it was very traumatic for the little boy because he didn't want to answer the phone. He was looking for adults to answer the phone, and there were no adults there. So he went to the phone. He answered it finally as it got too loud to deal with, and he answered it. And at the other end, there was an adult man screaming and crying about that he was burning up in a building, and he even said the floor he was on, and he named his co-workers, and he said, okay, and the little boy was trying to calm him down, trying to tell him there was no adults around, trying to speak to him, but it was like he wasn't hearing the little boy. And the little boy finally got very upset as this man was going on about how hot it was getting, and the flames were rising higher, and the little boy finally hung up the phone and ran away. In the end, his dream ended.
Wow, unbelievable.
That was reported in, and when I went there with the officer, when we finished with it, it was a little traumatic for the child.
Yes.
So it was a little hard to force him to remember this dream that he had tried to put out of his mind. And so when we were done with it, we were coming out, and the officer who was with me was actually, he was in tears. And I told him, I tried to tell him, we did everything we could to be gentle as possible with the little boy. The little boy, the little boy will be fine. He's a little kid. He'll bounce back. And the officer who was with me said, I'm not concerned about the little boy. I'm concerned about myself. I had the exact same dream before 9/11.
Oh my goodness. Wow. I hope our audience watching the show today and hearing John know how real this is, that, even right down to little kids are having these dreams and precognitions, not at the time, but before, weeks before the actual event happened. John, was there a certain age with these children?
The ages appeared to be from 8 to about 13, 12. 8 to, I would say, from about as young as, anywhere as young for a 7, going all the way to 12.
Mm-hmm. Can you share another story with us, John, of the 9/11 kids?
Yeah, we had, for instance, we had one little girl who was just playing by herself in the yard, and she was just doing motions with her hands. And this was this teacher's assistant came up to her and said, "What are you doing?" And she says, and she said to the teacher's assistant, "I'm pretending to be one of the people that fall out of the windows on fire and fall to the ground." And teacher said, what are you talking about?" And she said to the teacher, "That happens sometimes. People can be in buildings where they catch on fire, and they jump out of windows and they're on fire, and that can happen." And the teacher just put her hands up and said, "Okay, I don't know. I don't know what's going on, but don't be jumping around like that. You're going to hurt yourself if you do that." And she walked away and didn't think any more about it. And that was the day before 9/11 occurred.
Wow.
And she reported it, as ridiculous as she felt.
Yeah. How did you guys close out these files then? Because, what were the FBI's conclusions on all of this?
The conclusion was always the same in each and every instance, because the officers who did all these cases, we had conferences and so forth where we actually got together, mm-hmm. and we were able to talk about these cases. And they were all closed out the exact same way. Final determination of no connection to terrorism whatsoever. That's it. And that's the only way we were able to close them out. And in each instance, each one was closed out that way.
Mm-hmm. But they knew that these kids, something was going on paranormally. They had this ability to
Yes.
know this.
Yes, and we, the officers who dealt with these cases, yes, we knew that for sure, because we were there, we were with these kids, and we knew they were telling the truth, and we knew that their paranormal experiences were genuine. However, officially, we couldn't do anything further with these kids. We couldn't refer
Right.
them to
Right.
a shop
Right.
that would study their experiences
Of
or that
course.
would do further tests on them.
Of course.
You see.
Yeah.
At least officially.
Officially. John, has anyone that you know of ever made a call to the FBI to say, "Hey, I had a premonition about something that I feel is going to happen," and the FBI taking it seriously?
I'm sure that happens all the time. That happens in all of law enforcement and major metropolitan PDs, police departments all the time. And so I think that's a pretty common occurrence. However, the thing that's not so common is that when they come in directly to the office and they say, I have a clue, I have an understanding of where this body is buried. And if we send some officers out right now, they can go find this body in this unsolved murder, and we can go and get them. Mm-hmm. And officers always want to respond to that in a positive way and go find out if the person's actually telling the truth. But sometimes superior officers tend to say, well, we got to check out that psychic first to see if they could have a connection to this murder.
Right.
You see?
Right.
That's how that usually goes.
Okay. We had a question for you, John, from Stella in Marina Del Rey. And Stella asked, John, have you ever experienced precognitive dreams that happened? Have you had them yourself?
Wow, I'm sure that I have. I think that's a pretty common experience. The problem is it's hard to trust your own experience and to act on it until it actually happens.
Right.
And then after the fact, anybody can know that that was a precognition dream,
right.
And it actually did happen. But before it actually comes true, it's hard to really trust and act on that kind of thing.
Right, and I've had them too over the years. They've not been consistent, but I've certainly had them. What about intuition? Do you have intuitive abilities also?
I feel that I do, but I feel that everyone does.
Yes.
And so the only question is, am I the person that pays attention rather than trying to ignore the natural intuitive abilities that everybody really has?
Right, and I think, as you're saying, everybody does have paranormal, this happens to lots of people. They have paranormal abilities and paranormal things happen in their life, and they feel that they find it so difficult to accept. It's hard for people to grasp that they are actually having those experiences. Why do you think, John, there's becoming an increase across the planet of these Indigo Kids, of what's happening here? Just before we go to our break, if you could answer that.
I think that the veil is thinning. I think that the veil between our world and the many other dimensions of reality is thinning as we approach some kind of great symbol crash, some kind of final revelation of things that are really going on. And I think that increases the natural abilities of these star children, these Indigo Kids that are all over the world right now.
And there's a high percentage, obviously, out there.
And they're becoming a higher and higher percentage all the time.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. John, we are just about to head to our break, so we don't want you to go anywhere. So a quick word from our sponsor. The Tracie Austin Show would like to thank our sponsor, Zohar Stargate TV. And for more information about our sponsor, please visit zoharstargate.com. Welcome back to the show, John.
Thank you, Tracie. Great to be here with you.
Just wanted to talk to you about the fact of there are a number of researchers out there working with Indigo children. Dr. Meg Losey, don't know if you've heard of Dr. Meg, but we're bringing a photo up on screen of her right now. She's written a book, The Children of Now. She is doing amazing work with children in the USA and around the world. And she says that these children operate from the universal mind, or the Akashic field. And they tell Dr. Losey that they have come to show us how to love, and that we've forgotten what unconditional love really is. What's your thoughts on that, John?
Yeah, I think that's part of their assignment. Their assignment in being here with us is to teach us to think in different ways, in new ways, and to lift ourselves up out of the previous paradigm that we are in, because these are children that are way showers.
Yes.
They are showing us what is the proper way to achieve the next level in our evolution. Mm-hmm. And so we need to support these kids, we need to uplift them, and we need to emulate them as well.
It's like, where do we take these kids to open their abilities more? Where do we go?
I don't know. We need academies like the Dr. Xavier's Academy for Mutant Kids. We need to keep them away from public schools the way they're set up right now.
Right.
Because that just crushes creativity, crushes originality, and creative powers. That's what I see. Because I see kids that when they're babies, you see, and many people have had that experience of seeing babies that suddenly point up at the ceiling and smile even before they can talk, and they're looking at something, and the adults are looking up at the ceiling. There's nothing.
What are you
there.
looking at? Yes, exactly.
But they're looking at something
beautiful
and
right.
radiant.
Right.
And they see it.
Right.
They see it. And so there's a chance that there are so many kids like that that are developing special abilities and creative powers that we can't imagine until they go into that rigid system that tells them, no, this doesn't exist. That isn't real. That's not real.
Right. And then it shuts them down. At least it
Exactly.
tries to. Right. Mary Rodwell. I'm sure you're familiar with Mary.
Heard that name yet?
Yep. We're bringing a photo of Mary on screen right now. She's another researcher and friend of mine in Queensland, Australia. And she talks about the new humans in her book, and that the metaphysical community has many names for these children that are being born now, not only indigo children, but crystal children, as you've mentioned, golden children, children of the light. And what Mary's also discovered is that it's global. Do you agree with that, John, that this is, in fact, a global thing?
Absolutely. These children are being born in every society. They are developing and being developed, hopefully, in every society. They are appearing everywhere, and we need to find them so that they can be encouraged, and we need to also make sure that they don't fall into the wrong hands of
Exactly.
Scientific skepticism.
Exactly,
in other words.
and that they're guided in the right way. I've heard Mary give a few examples, actually, of children in the Himalayas that they're using an unknown sign language, and that these children communicate telepathically with unseen ETs. A similar thing in Mexico, that there are children who are extra agile, they're very talented and have problem-solving skills at a very high level. Also, they continually use a strange language amongst themselves. I did hear Mary talk of a 17-year-old girl who, when blindfolded, could, and this is amazing, John, she could scan over a photograph with her hand and tell you what was in the photograph, being blindfolded, but with her hand over the photograph. And then when a newspaper was placed underneath her feet, she could read the headlines through her shoes. So
That is amazing.
these are the kinds of abilities that kids are developing all across the planet. Have you ever heard about the children in China, John, with similar abilities?
No, what can they do?
These kids, they're very psychic, they're intuitive. Some even have the abilities to open up flower buds just by thought alone. So the Chinese government are aware of these children. And they went into a theatre, they filled the theatre with people, and as they walked through the door, they gave everyone in the audience a flower bud on a stem. Because, they're waiting to see what happens, so they all walk in with their flower bud. This little girl walks on the stage, does some movement with her hands, all the flower buds open up. And that is factual information, and the Chinese government are aware of these very special children.
Yeah, why is it that Chinese government and even the Russian government, to a certain extent, are more open to the paranormal and developing the paranormal in their own people,
right,
than the United States? But when it comes to the United States, it's the absolute opposite. It's like, shut it all down. Well, we don't want to know about that. It's like, what is it about the Chinese and the Russians,
right,
that they see this stuff as real? They see this real, and they see this as something that should be encouraged and developed. It's a terrible pity. It really is.
It is, and America is one of those countries that is just, the box isn't open to this kind of thing. And I think also in England, same thing there. The box isn't open, the lid isn't open to acknowledge this kind of thing. And it's been reported that the Chinese government has observed these children changing human DNA molecule in a Petri dish before cameras and scientific equipment has actually recorded these kids, which is supposedly an impossible task, but they're changing the DNA molecule in a Petri dish.
Wow.
So,
Tracie, you and I should do a TV show on this.
We really should. I think that would be a great idea, and bring it to the public. Why not?
Absolutely, because this is wild stuff.
You're on, John. We'll do it. We'll do it. These kids in China are being fostered and they are being encouraged in China, so that's good to know. So,
I think one of the answers for why the United States, why Russia and China encourage this sort of thing and study it and develop it, is it's just like it's just because of enlightened self-interest. I think they have a self-interest where they know that pursuing and developing this kind of thing in kids and even in adults also is something that is going to help them. It's going to give them advantages that other nations are not going to have. And unfortunately, in the United States, we're not allowed to think that way. We're not allowed to have the same approach of that. This is going to help everybody. This is going to help us. It's going to help everybody, and that's just not allowed here, and it's too bad.
Right. Yeah. Somebody needs to find a way to help these children and to encourage this to come forth. Just getting back to the kids of 9/11, John, are you aware that any of this happened globally, or is this just within the United States that these kids were having these precognitive dreams?
I would wager any amount that this happened globally. This happened in many other nations, because other nations have the same, or I should say higher ratios of Indigo Kids with special abilities. And so I'm sure it occurred before 9/11 in other nations as well, and all over the globe. But the question is, who's going to report it, and who's going to report on these kids?
Exactly.
In this nation, the only reason it was reported because there was a high level of paranoia that was spread by our government that really created this huge pressure to report these incidences no matter what.
Right. We are hoping to have on the show, John, over the coming weeks, a little boy named Adam Garcia. He's an indigo child, or a crystal child, and quite appropriately called because he communicates with crystals. And all types of crystals. And this child has a natural ability to connect with them and the stones. He hears and senses the frequencies of the stones. And at the age of 7, he created his first crystal grid and is recognized as one of the top 5 crystal gurus of all time by the Crystal Age of the UK magazine. So any final thoughts, John, on these Indigo Kids from you?
I just think I think what you're doing, Tracie, is so important. Anything that we can do to communicate about these Indigo Kids and to encourage them to foster their abilities, I just think that is so important. And that's why that's why in my books I always talk about kids. I always talk about children and the experiences of children. It's always very important to me, because even kids can be investigators. Even kids can be experiencers. Well, kids are experiencers.
Right.
Most people who are experiencers as adults, they started as kids being experiencers. That's what people don't know. So we have to look at these kids, look at their creative powers, and we have to develop them at an early age. And we have to let people understand that they are not different, that they are gifted. That is so important.
Exactly. And these Indigo Kids aren't just female, are they, John, or just male? There's a whole mixture of male and female across the planet that has this ability and this gift. Have you ever met an Indigo child yourself?
I'm sure I have, but they, like everything else, they look like everybody else, like all other kids.
Right.
So I'm sure I have met one, but I have not seen them demonstrate their abilities in front of me. And that's probably the only reason that I haven't. However, I have had those incidences of where I've seen a baby. I've been with baby that had special abilities to see something that everybody else didn't see. And I've been in the room when a baby, and it's not a kid yet, but a baby has pointed up at the ceiling and smiled and been seeing something that the rest of us couldn't see.
Right.
So that's a very early example of something that's going to be an Indigo Kid,
Right.
Hopefully.
And obviously what that child was seeing it sounds like something from the spirit world that, like you said, no one else could see.
Exactly.
So happens from a very young age.
Yeah, it
and
definitely
develops.
does.
Exactly. So we wanted to just, point out to our audience, if you have an Indigo child or you know of an Indigo child, we would love to hear from you. Do write to me, send me an email at info@thetracieustinshow.com. Remember Tracie, Tracie. I'd love to hear from you. John, can we expect any more new books from you? I hope so.
Yeah, I'm getting ready to release my next book called The Clear Hearers, which is about a book about one investigation that I did as a child, like an Indigo investigator, an investigation that started with me as a child and was one of the motivators of why I became an FBI agent. And the book is called The Clear Hearers, and it will be coming out in the next couple of months. Yeah.
Wonderful. We are going to look out for that book, Clear Hearers.
The Clear Hearers, yes.
The Clear Hearers. Got it. John, it's been fabulous talking to you again. So thank you for joining us once again on our show. And your website is?
JohnTamaBooks.com. That's my website. And people can always connect with me on my Facebook, my Twitter, my YouTube channel. And if they just Google me, John DeSouza, D like David, ESOUZA, they can find all of my material always.
Fantastic. Thank you again, John. And thank you for watching. Don't forget to check us out, The Tracie Austin Show, on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And we'd love you to also be a subscriber. So if you haven't yet done it yet, we just wanted to make sure that you do that. Until next time, be safe, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye. The Tracie Austin Show would like to thank our sponsor, Zohar Stargate TV. And for more information about our sponsor, please visit zoharstargate.tv.